Welcome to the Seafood Matters podcast. I'm your host, Jim Cowie. In each episode, I speak with industry leaders, fishery scientists, fishermen, and seafood chefs. We'll highlight the importance of seafood in our daily lives, economy, and environment. Whether you catch your own seafood, love cooking it, or want to learn more about where your fish comes from, you'll find it all here on the Seafood Matters podcast. If you enjoy this episode, hit subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave a 5-star review. And you can get in touch with me by visiting seafoodmatterspodcast.com. Kara Brydson is the Executive Director of Fisheries, Innovation and Sustainability, based in Pitlochry, a town north of Perth in central Scotland. With an impressive track record of supporting fisheries in Scotland since 2014, this organisation has invested more than £3 million into innovations for achieving sustainability in the UK seafood industry. In this episode, Kara discusses how modern fishing technologies are being used to secure a more stable future for both fishermen and the environment. And she also shares her goals to have various sectors within the fishing industry achieve clear communications with each other to secure the sustainable future she envisions. Welcome to Seafood Matters podcast, Kara Brydson. You're involved in fishing innovation and sustainability, which is a pretty important subject to the fishing industry. Can you tell us about it, please, what your role is?
That's right. Fisheries, innovation and sustainability. We're a coalition of experts. Some folk hate to be called an expert, but I would count on people being experts. I would count them as such, and that includes active fishermen themselves. And our job is to come together to champion innovation to support sustainable and prosperous fisheries. So look for those projects that can help businesses, fishermen themselves, and the communities that support them.
Yeah, I'm in my 70s and I've been in the fishing industry. My father was a fisherman, so all my friends and going back to school were. But I would have to say that fishermen are very open to change and learning new things. Always have been. Even with innovation, stronger now than it possibly was before. But they were still very adaptable.
I think that's absolutely the case. What sometimes trips people up with this small group of people is what is innovation. And I'm always very quick to say that it's many things to many people, but sometimes people think that it just has to be about new and shiny bits of kit, but also, and it can be new bits of gear or new widgets, so to speak, but actually it's about new ways of working together, new ways of talking to each other, new ways of sharing information is a really important thing, and new ways of doing things. There's that old saying that in innovation that if you're doing things the way you've always done them, you're probably doing them wrong. And I don't actually agree with that, because I think there are still, if you've done something and it works for you and it works for your business, then that's great. But if you're needing some new ways of things to really help your business, whether it's to make yourself improve markets, improve sustainability, improve relationships with your customers, then maybe there are things that we can do to help you improve that. And I think it's about new ways of telling your story as well, I think is really important for us as a seafood industry, because there are so many misconceptions out there about businesses, individuals, practices. So if we can help by giving new information about our brilliant businesses, then that to me is an innovation as well. It's not all about, a bit of kit that make a change. But something that I always want to say to people as well is that when things are tough and people have a job to do, the last thing some folk want to do is to raise their heads and think about new things. If it's difficult enough finding your markets and your customers and finding crew or finding workers, then why on earth would you embrace change? And that, I think, is what FIS is there to do. A group of people that are there to help take the strain and to help maybe in finding the practical and timely ways of improving what's happening out there. Because some people do come to me and say, oh, what is that? What's that woman on about now? What fresh hell is this? And I completely understand that. But I think the last thing I'll say on this is innovation's not a nice to have. It's not a sort of, okay, well, when everything's working well, we'll think about it in the future. It's often at the difficult times that you really need to find those innovative and new ways of doing things or working together. Because otherwise, if you want to wait for that perfect moment, it will probably never come. So now is the time to help make those changes for good.
You know, my experience working very closely with fishermen, even going to school, there were a lot of fishermen in my class and classes around me. They maybe didn't win, they maybe weren't first in French and Latin and subject like that, but they're masters of their own profession.
Absolutely. So our board, the people who govern and pay for FIS, are Sainsbury's, Marks and Spencer's, Fishmongers Company, Young Seafood and Seafish, the Industry Authority. But we have a stakeholder committee that is made up of lots of people from lots of businesses along the supply chain. And what we always see is nothing about us without us. So when people at one end of the supply chain has an idea, you have to ground truth it with the person at the other and say, okay, what does that mean for all of us? So absolutely making sure that the people with that knowledge, the practical working knowledge, are there right at the beginning of an idea. Otherwise, there's absolutely no point in taking time and spending money if the person who has to actually implement the change or trial the thing goes, well, what on earth's the point of that? So yeah, everything we do has to be practical. The work that we do at FIS is never just going to be an interesting idea in a report. It has to be practical and something you can implement on the water or on the quayside will actually make a difference for folk. So yes, having that expertise directly from whether it's a fisherman or a processor or somebody who knows about clients is really important.
You know, there's a situation I was told about. It's two people, cousins of mine. One of them was a successful fisherman. For many years he had his own boats. He's built about 3 new boats, improving and getting on. He's 86, he's 87 as we speak. His younger brother, who's got a small boat at the creels, and they do some jigging and handlines. And they were out just about a month ago, and he was trying to get some haddocks, and the brother says to him, he says, you won't get haddocks here. So they steamed roughly 5 mile. They put the lines down, and immediately they started catching haddock. Now he's retired, he's off the sea and retired, boat sold for 30 years. Now, and there was no electronic equipment to guide them to the spot. It was all done by landmarks and where the moon was or the sun was at the time of day. That's clever.
It's funny, not that often, but I will fairly regularly. Somebody will get in touch, probably not from the fishing industry directly, but they'll say, we have this brilliant idea. And they can't, it's to help somebody do X or Y. And I always, because I'm not a fisherman, I'm not a scientist, I'll always take any ideas, even if after 20 years of me working with the seafood industry, even after 20 years, I think, well, who am I to say? So I will take it to somebody in the stakeholder committee, or I'll pick up the phone, and people are pretty used to me asking daft lassie questions after all this time. And I'll say, look, there's this idea, what do you think? And I'm usually sort of right when people say, well, what's the point of that? We already do it by this way or that way. So often people will come up with some very fancy idea, and the way that it's being done just now will probably be all right. And the idea is, if it's a great idea, somebody will take you up on it. So yes, often people, the whole kind of getting a sledgehammer to crack a nut sometimes when people just are doing a good job as it is. However, we have to learn from other sectors. So there may be things, I didn't know until fairly recently, that how strong the UK is in satellite technology. Now, are there things happening in satellite technology that could help the seafood industry? We need to keep our options and our minds open. Similarly, in the biotech community, now they don't know about fishing and we don't really know so much about them, but look what they've managed to do in Iceland in terms of using waste product for biotech products. And one of my jobs is to try and almost speed date these industries together and say, you might not know about us, but hey, do you know that we've got this byproduct that might be useful to you? And similarly, I didn't know that Scotland was really up there in the race for satellite technology. How could you, as one of the newer industries, help us as one of the more traditional industries? So trying to learn from each other, but not jumping on every great idea that some, Tom, Dick and Harry come to us about.
One of the things I read part of your website was simply getting better at old ideas as well. I think that's, I like to hear that, because it doesn't mean to say because it was in the past that they're bad.
Absolutely not. And if they're still going, then there's definitely something in them. But I always say, if somebody is using, is there a way to optimize it? If somebody has found out a good idea, but maybe doesn't know that there's help out there or money out there to help them make the most of it. And that's something that FIS has done over a long period of time. We've managed to leverage funding for good ideas to help out industry. There is money out there that often goes, in my mind, to the people who can't implement it as well as we could ourselves. So making sure that if there is support there for good ideas, that it comes directly to the fishing industry, not for other people to decide what would be good for the seafood industry, but for the seafood industry to do themselves. Because there are a lot of people pushing for change within the seafood industry in the UK. And sometimes that's legislative, so sometimes it's political timelines or political ideas. Sometimes it's coming from consumers or customers themselves. And you can't just stick your head in the sand, is my view, personally. I think because if you do, changes will be pushed upon us that don't work for us. So surely it's better that we think, okay, well, if we do have to think about humane handling or net zero vessels, what would be best for us? Because in the example of looking forward to reducing your reliance on diesel, for example, if other maritime industries are looking at ports and harbours and infrastructure and safety training, we might end up with what's best for them and not best for the fishing industry themselves. And what we did was we asked a young Scottish skipper to go to Norway to look at what they were doing in terms of finding alternative fuels for fishing vessels. And he very strongly said that a wrong move now pushed upon us by other maritime sectors might have really serious consequences for the viability of our fleets here. So rather than wait for other people to push things upon us, I always think it's better for us to start thinking about opportunities that will fit us. Now, it might be that people don't want to open a particular Pandora's box, and that's when people, I know that there'll be some folk who go, oh, why on earth is she talking about net zero vessels? Why on earth are we thinking about looking at stunning machines, for example? But if we don't think of them for ourselves, then we might not like what is pushed upon us further down the line.
Yes, 100% with you there. And the other factor built into that is fishermen. They are 100% committed themselves in every aspect of the word, financially as well. And I've come across many, many fishermen in my days who have really got a massive commitment with the securities they have to put up to get their new boats and get them working and things. And any new innovation or any new gear or that, it's as far as the fisherman is concerned, it's money.
And I think that the thing that we and the board and our stakeholder committee that we shout about, I think the loudest at the minute, is that there are many fishermen out there that are early adopters and innovators, and they are the real pioneers for ideas. But nobody should be expected to take the risks on themselves. And so that for early adopters of new ideas should be able to access financial assistance, they should be able to get business advice for what they're doing, they need to get regulatory support. So we have an example of a skipper here in Scotland who has developed his vessel to work on electric and in hybrid solutions. And even trying to get sign off for that vessel from the authorities has been really difficult. Now, I always believe if we're teaching the regulators about something that's new, then you shouldn't be having to pay for that. You should be supported in helping us all as a community learn how we're going to deal with new ideas. So I and Fizz, we're here to say, okay, well, let's all of us bear the brunt for those early adopters, because business is already tricky enough without expecting individual businesses or individual families to try and kind of forge ahead with good ideas that will eventually help us all. So now we understand that, some businesses want to keep things kind of quiet, completely understand. Everything we do at Fizz is pre-competitive, and we want the ideas to be open for everyone to have that opportunity to take things forward. And because of that, then no individual should bear the brunt of that. And that's why we think that there needs to be financial assistance, business assistance, even some kind of benefits to those businesses that trial new things and help us learn the pitfalls, as well as hopefully see a positive way ahead with some of these ideas.
Immediately when you said that the trouble your skipper had getting it through, you just wonder if the authorities he was speaking to even understand it.
Couldn't possibly comment. When it's new to all of us, it must be quite difficult for an individual within a regulator to go, yeah, okay, let's try it. I find it very difficult I feel it's getting increasingly difficult for the industry to be given the benefit of the doubt to try new things. When you look at countries such as Iceland, I know it's a completely different setup and it's very unfair often to compare one country to another, but there are countries where that culture of innovation is embedded into management and regulation and the industry. It would be fantastic if whenever there were good ideas for the seafood industry to take forward, that there was that sort of public license or political license for us to go ahead and try good things. Sometimes the impression that people who don't know about seafood and fishing, the impression they have of us can stop people from giving us that benefit of the doubt, because they might automatically feel, oh, well, they would say that, wouldn't they? They want more money, or they want more fishing, or they want more this or that. Actually, what we want is to make the best out of our fishing opportunity, make the best out of our businesses, having the best product, selling it to the best markets. And often I don't think we're given that public license to try new things.
Yeah, a lot of it is trust, and you can understand why fishermen don't trust everybody, because quite often they end up not just as rosy as it was promised. Moving on, Kara, I have to say that it really fascinates me, your organisation, and I genuinely mean that. It takes me back myself, because that's why I was so pleased to see the better at older ideas, because I think it's fantastic for your organisation to have so many different bodies on board, like supermarkets, fishermen. You can right through the chain, and I think it is so important. And I think a credit to you all for doing that. I can go back to the 80s, and I was agency for quite a number of fishing boats, and I had a lot of connections with fish processors, and obviously selling fish to them. And so we put it together. And I don't really worry too much about mentioning names, not individuals' names, but we took a thing together which was so successful for over 20 years with fishing boats. We had a guaranteed price, reviewed every 3 months, and that went to one of the major fish processors, and on board too was some of the major supermarkets. M&S and Tesco's were two of them. So we had the fisherman, myself as the agent, processor, and the supermarket. And the fisherman knew exactly, as he was taking just say for example haddock, as he was taking haddock on board his boat, he knew exactly how that haddock would be presented to the public on the supermarket shelf. And the fishermen enjoyed it because they had a stable, they knew almost as their fish was getting caught and the tally, the weights and grades and that were coming from the fish room, they could almost work out their tally. So they knew exactly how they were doing. And the supermarket and the processor knew what their products were going to be like and what their production. So seeing what you're doing now, it takes me back to that. And, I don't think that's impossible still.
But I bet it was difficult. Bet it was hard to do. And with our digitalisation project, even what we found is even with great people being round the table, it's quite hard to make sure that trust and understanding of what new ideas like digitalisation, what that means. Just to go back a bit on this. So this was, to be honest, the idea of digitalisation, I don't think I really understood what it was or what it meant and why you wanted it. So often it's how you start talking about a concept or an idea, because straight away some people, friends and colleagues and, the communities we work in, think that data sharing is always going to work against them. So it's about, it's a big brother idea. And I talk a lot about data for good rather than evil. So it's not always about, it's the carrot as well as the stick when it comes to data sharing. And so quite rightly, people were like, well, actually, we're all right the way that we talk to our supply chains. So we worked with Frank Fleming at Verifact. Frank used to be a fisherman and works a lot with the Irish fishing industry. And we tried to understand what would better data collection do for the people who are catching, as well. Sometimes when you talk about a project, the catchers might think, well, it'll benefit the processors, or the processors think, well, it'll only benefit the retailers. Trying to find a project that ticks everybody's boxes is, I suppose, the holy grail. And we were able to say, look, if we use digital technology to capture information once and share it to those people who need it, but under, really clear sharing agreements. So it's not going to go far and wide, but just sharing the important data with people who need it. Look what it could do. It could add value to the catches. It would give clarity to the supply chain in terms of how much something's worth. It could mean that you have more confidence in a transparent supply chain. Consumers might want to know more about, you can prove the ethical and the provenance credentials of what you're selling, so that there are benefits to everybody. It's not just about management governance. It's also about just, as I say, telling your story, making more money for your product, and making sure that you can access those markets that really require more information along the supply chain. And so just having a lot of time to talk about the benefits of data sharing was really useful, let alone, yes, let's use our data, fisheries data, to help answer some of those scientific or sustainability questions, because it helps tell our story in a way that's much more positive than if people assume that we're trying to hide things. So working with that project, it wasn't easy because people already have busy jobs, and trying to say, well, if we can improve the way you share information, when we get it right, it could save time and effort because you're letting people know what they need to know at the right time. It sounds simple, it was still difficult, we're still working on it. So it's great to hear that you've had positive responses in the past.
Yeah, I think being realistic, a lot of the problems, not one person or not one sector, is a basic mistrust. And I would say, yes, I had possibly had, in some ways, I wouldn't like to say it was all me. It was not me, because there were fishermen, as I said, it went on for 20 years. But I think, in fairness, fishermen, the same as everybody else worldwide, there's certain people who will stick by their word and be stable and loyal, and there's some that don't. So I think we possibly had the right people. But the mistrust was on all sides, because you would get some processors saying, oh, we were getting fish from somebody, but it all stopped when the market price started rising. You would hear things coming from a supermarket, which I have to say myself, it grates with me when I see it. You'll see an advert for, let's say, supporting British fishermen, and you look at the packs of fish in their counters, and it's Norwegian, Icelandic, Russian even, and I just often think, well, what support for British fishermen is that? So there's a mistrust all along the way, but it shows that if you get the right people and the right products, yes, it can work, and I am absolutely sure it still can.
I think there's that whole supply chain digitalisation work to improve traceability and verification. It takes a leap of faith. It takes everybody committing to something. I always say that for a lot of innovation takes time and it takes trust. And so you have to work together for a while before we really get the good stuff. But that's why when we piloted these, piloting in a project can mean that there's a safe space to trial new things. And I'm always very clear to say, just because you pilot something doesn't mean that will be an automatic, the next step is full-blown project rollout across the country. It's a way to iron out the problems, find out who you can really work with, make sure everybody continues to be happy. But if it's not showing, if it's not helping somebody save time, save money, access markets, then that's when you have to ask yourself, well, what's the point? Maybe the idea is too soon, or maybe it's just not the idea that we thought it was. So you've always got to be able to tweak things and consider next steps. Just because you start on a good idea, things might change fairly quickly. But fundamentally, understanding, sharing information, telling the story, helping people provide information once. There's lots of different certification schemes, different markets may have different requirements. You have to tell a lot of people about your product. So if you can do that once, safely, efficiently, and that information is shared along the supply chain to those who need to know, then that might save you time. It improves confidence in your product. It might help you access a market that has a particular requirement. But now, we were always very clear to say it's not for everybody. If you sell a product at market and that's it, and you can always shift your product, then maybe you don't need it. But if you want to have pride in a product that goes into a particular supply chain, then you might need to gather, share information in a different way. And that's what we'd be here to help you with.
Yes, I'm with you there 100%. Kara, because the point you're actually making, although I may be saying it in slightly different words, it can be the best product in the world, which Scottish fish is in that category as far as I'm concerned. But we still have to sell it. You have to market it. It doesn't happen on its own.
Yeah. And if we can't give, obviously, and FIS is UK organisation, but for anybody, whether you're selling from Cornwall or from Hull or from Scotland, if you're not meeting market requirements, then we're not charities. You have to provide the fish in the quality and the quantity that is required of that market. Now, again, if there's a mismatch there, is something that an organisation like FIS can do to help. but it's understanding the needs. I think the days of catching and then just, selling it on the market and not knowing where that goes, those days are gone. What does your customer need? What does your supply chain require you to do? Because you have to show your workings, whether that's on requirements now about where it's caught, whether it's requirements in the future about other things such as the handling of the fish or your vessel emissions. Who knows what's going to be required in the future? And again, that's part of our job at FIS, is to try and work out what will be required of you in the future and making sure that we can help businesses prepare for that, to make sure they're still safe, they're still competitive, and that they're meeting these market requirements.
On your innovation side, can you tell me something about Smart Roll?
Smart Roll. Now this is the brainchild of Professor Paul Fernandez, who used to be at Aberdeen University, now at Heriot Watt University in the Lyle Centre and their National Robotarium. And it is really exciting. It's something that FIS has supported right from the very beginning. It's a FIS project where what we hope to happen, and we are a bit away from this, but we're getting nearer, is that the system will allow skippers to select the fish that they want to catch, keep that valuable catch, but release unwanted fish unharmed back into the sea. And this is all happening at the beginning of the net in the water. In water selectivity, precision fishing. These are big words that are being used just now. So it's a stereo camera with lighting in the trawl extension, high quality images of fish entering the cod end. The onboard computer then identifies the size and species, and so the decision is made in real time whether the fish go into the cod end or don't. And that's using this very novel gate system that we've patented. So we've got a long way to go. Innovation takes time to go through lots of iterations of making sure things work in different situations. But the pieces of the system are now being brought together. They've been trialled at sea by the University of Highlands and Islands Shetland. So we've been at sea in commercial vessels, and we are making great strides towards what would be the biggest response to the landing obligation and all the other requirements to make sure that you catch what you want to catch and you're releasing what you don't want to catch unharmed back into the sea.
That seems pretty impressive. And is that, I take it as like cameras at the net, and the skipper can be in the wheelhouse watching?
That's what we're aiming for. At the minute, we're just making the component pieces work. So an awful lot of AI, so artificial intelligence, making sure that the camera would know what the particular fish are. That's a new thing. The gate, which either allows the fish to enter the cod end or make sure that other animals, because again, it's for animals you don't want to catch, so that that's not an issue. So all of these things are coming together. If your listeners want to know more, we've got a great video on the FIS website, which hopefully they can access, and you'll see it in action. We've got some lovely drone footage and footage of the skipper up in Shetland using this. So as I say, we're at that point where we know it can work. We're bringing the different components together to try and show that as a whole it would work. And we actually had it over in Dubai for the COP, Conference of Parties, in November, where people are really interested in what we're doing, and we want to make sure that this would be a piece of kit that would work for UK skippers, so that it's not we would want it to be affordable and accessible so that skippers could use it. Again, as I say, everything we do at FIS is about being practical and affordable and make a difference on the water.
It's really exciting, and as I know full well from many years of experience, if it's practical and it works and makes sense, a fisherman will wear it.
We've been really lucky that not only have the board members been excited about this, but also our stakeholder committee members. So, of course, as ever, as you'll know, fishermen will ask the pointed questions. Well, we were at the Scottish Skipper Expo in Aberdeen last year, showing images that we'd gathered from the bits of kit. And of course, there are people saying, well, how does that work? And how would that work? And what would happen if you got a tree stuck in that? And what would you know? All of these questions are so important because there's lots of things that the cleverest people in the world wouldn't have thought of, that a skipper or somebody working in a boat will go, but what if that happens? And that's why all the time we're trying to make sure that the team at Heriot Watt and Paul Fernandez's team are bringing it all together, that we're asking those really practical questions of, well, what would happen if this happened on board the vessel? And of course, now we've shown that the kit can enter the water safely, can be brought up safely. Safety is always the biggest thing in my mind. How would this help keep people safe and competitive? How would it build their business? And yeah, if we can prove it works, then people will want it.
It's really encouraging, and as I'm well aware, I'm talking to the converted when I say it to you, but fishermen will accept it. And
if we can prove it works.
but they will contribute anything they can to make sure it does work. And I think it's fantastic for the project that they're talking and listening to fishermen, because they know that's their environment. They know that, and it's really grates with a lot of them at times when scientists who are making decisions ridiculous in their minds is they've never spoken to a fisherman.
Yes. Well, I'm not I don't come from a fishing family. I come from a farming family, and I do say it's still that same fifth generation cynical West of Scotlanders. So unless it's doing what it's meant to do, then let's not get excited. I'm the one who sits there going, okay, we need critical friends to come and say, what about this? How will we make that better? And even when the whole things work out, as you know, every boat's different, every skipper's different, every, what you're using to fish where and when is different. And we will have to test this on all these different points before I can be happy to say, okay, it's a thing.
I get that, but there's 2 points, 2 words you mentioned there, which I'll maybe just slightly pull you up on. One of them was, let's not get excited. And my answer to that would be, why not?
Because members of my stakeholder committee have told me so often, I can get way too enthusiastic about things, and all it takes is one person saying, but what about? That's
okay. But I bet you the type of person you are, you just shrug your shoulders and say, right, let's listen to what about. It doesn't put you down.
We never give up, do we?
No. The other thing I was going to point out to you, just minutes ago there, you expressed to me how lucky you were. Kara, I don't believe you're talking to the wrong person. I don't believe in luck. We make our own luck. We work for it. So it's not you're lucky. You're working hard.
That's very kind of you, but I do genuinely really appreciate the individual board members and stakeholder committee members who give their time for this, and they are a brilliant bunch of people that all are so genuinely enthusiastic about their industry and their businesses, and I think that's just fantastic, and I do appreciate them.
That's why I'm saying it's not luck. I know a lot of the people you're talking about. It's not luck. You're good.
So I always say, we've got our chairman is John Goodlad from Shetland, and it's just fantastic to have John, given that he's an author and a historian, and he knows so much about our industry's past and how we've come, but yet he's so interested in what we're going into and the opportunities going forward. So often we talk as an organisation about those opportunities, and yes, there are threats and there are worries, but there are so many great things that we can look forward to, and it's brilliant to have people like John who know so much about where we've come from but still get very excited about the opportunities in the future.
A huge respect for John. I know him very well for a long time. And In fact, before this podcast will be released, there'll be 2 with John just before that.
Oh, folk will be bored of this.
So,
Great
yeah, really good. I class him as a really close friend, and exactly everything you said. He goes by like I said earlier about myself, his father, his parents, his family were fishing, so he knows the industry so well. And I remember when he was in the SFF and the Shetland Fishermen's Association and the Scottish, and that he had a huge respect from government ministers, and they really liked speaking to him because they knew they could trust him. He had a great rapport with all sectors of the industry. I thought it was fantastic. So you're in good hands.
Absolutely.
With the organisation going on from for a wee while, innovation, we've talked about all the innovation, but sustainability, I class sustainability, it's a really important for the fishing industry, but unfortunately I often class it as the most abused word in the English language, because a lot of people use it with absolutely no depth whatsoever behind it. One of the things that I do feel from speaking to many fishermen in all methods of fishing, from bottom trawling, sea netting, scallop dredging, they'll go, for example, good close friends of mine who are scallop dredgers, who over the course of the year will go right round the British Isles, different times of the year, fishing different areas, depending on the season. And in one case, a close friend, he's been over 40 years doing it. And as he says, well, what's not sustainable about that?
So as I always feel that I have to remind people, and as I know, when I first started working with in maritime work and within seafood, but more from the fishery side, my background is with non-governmental organisations, environmental organisations, and there are some individuals in the industry that still remember me as, or they say, oh, you're on bird quine, because I used to work with the RSPB and with other organisations. I do feel really keenly that we show and we prove our credentials about being, that dreadful word, sustainable in all aspects. And I think that we can do that. I get worried when people who maybe don't understand the industry, and I'm not pretending at all that I do understand all aspects of it, even as I feel that I'm getting there slightly, but this idea that we should all move to one kind of gear, or we could all move to one kind of fishery, just shows such a lack of understanding about markets and how the different fisheries that we require to catch different fish to supply different markets. And something that we've spoken about a lot with different groups like Fishing into the Future and others is this idea of fishing literacy. So you have people from the Communities of Inshore Fishing Alliance that are really great about this, saying we need to explain to people what our industry does and explain that there are different kinds of fisheries for different fish in different places, and really to help people understand the complexity of supply chains. And hopefully that will help us get away from this idea that one kind of fishing is good and another kind of fishing is bad. When people think it's simplistic as small is good, large is bad, or that if you fish in a particular manner, then you are somehow salt of the earth. But if you're a slightly larger boat fishing in a slightly different way, you're suddenly evil. That I find incredibly difficult to contend with. My view is that there are good things you can do that help in lots of different ways. So I feel that if you're fishing smart and informed precision fishing for a market where you know that your quality of fish that you're catching can get a good price, that means that you're out there for a shorter period of time, you can reduce your emissions, you're safer because you're not at sea, you're not being pushed to go somewhere you don't want to go, you can save fuel, and that means that you have a quality product that you can sell for a good price. Now that to me is the holy grail, and that to me is if you are fishing for a great product, for a good market in the best possible way. That to me is sustainability. It's about that whole piece and making sure that your business and the community that supports them are benefiting from that great way of fishing. That's what I would like to see.
You know, it's just reminding me when you're talking there about the different methods of fishing and different times and that. I remember my father used to tell me when he was at school, my grandfather, his father had a boat, and there were hand lines and things like that. And it's my father and his brothers, they bought a boat and went to the sea net. And everybody thought that's the finish of the fishing. That's the end of the fishing. Now we're talking in the early 50s. So that was going to finish the fishing. And then there were some of them getting bigger. So that was going to finish it. Then they started trawling. So it was definitely going to be the finish. Then there was pier trawling. And it just went on. And every time they saw something new, and there's words here, innovative, that was going to be the finish of the fishing. And I think the fish stocks are more resilient than ever people realise. And that's true.
I don't think anybody would argue that there are improvements to be made, and that where we can tread lighter on the environment, where we can reduce emissions, where we can make sure that the welfare of both the catch and the folk that are catching them, we will always try and make improvements. But that's about moving forward. It's when it's suggested that we all go back in time to something that I probably didn't even exist in the first place that I really worry. Now, I love the history of the industry. I love the Scottish Fishing Museum. I work with the Fishmongers Company looking at that brilliant history of Fishmongers Hall, for example. That's great, but it's also about looking forward. And so this idea that we can all go back in time to sou'westers and creels for everybody, I really worry about.
I've got just a ever so slightly different way of saying the exact same as you said there, Kara. I am interested in tomorrow. I have no interest in yesterday.
Well, I do like yesterday. You know, the history of everything that we've done in our seas really fascinates me. And so I still love thinking about where we've come from. I'm really proud that one of my members is the Fishmongers Company, and the fact that for 750 years, one of the ancient liveries, I think that's just wonderful. When we had the Fizz meetings in London just before Christmas at Fishmongers Hall, and I always get such a feeling of pride when you walk in to that building and you know just for how long that it's been such an important industry, the whole of the seafood sector in the UK. So it gives me an awful lot of pride, but I'm also get really excited when you see some of our kind of state-of-the-art vessels, whether you're in Shetland or up northeast or down the southwest. So it's both sides, isn't it? It's the history, but also the next steps that we're taking together.
I think I got it wrong there, to be honest. I think what I should have said was, I'm more interested in tomorrow than yesterday. Kara, on the shore side, keeping on the subject as far as sustainability is concerned, the last project I had a seafood restaurant in Scrabster, and we reached the point we were number 6 out of the top 10 sustainable restaurants in the world. With a environmental blogger, an American outfit, they had us number 6 out of the top 10 in the world. We've been the sustainable UK seafood restaurant. And one of the things that I felt always was really strongly, and I always kept a ethical and environmental policy. I always felt a central plank of that was not just buying the fish you want, but utilising every part of it. Waste to me is just awful. And every part of a fish I would use for different things, the different parts of it, the cheeks, the jaws, the belly flap, the loin, tail, and every part of it. So on a principle, why buy 5 fish when you get by with 2 or 3?
Absolutely. There's also this idea of the other uses for byproducts. So I know that some of the Northern Irish fishermen here in Scotland, in England, elsewhere, are really interested by what has been managed in Iceland to valorise byproduct, or what was thought of as being a waste product. So yes, using what you can for human consumption and sale, but where there's other ideas to use the byproducts of fishing. And if that, as long as that money comes back into the industry, I think that's a fantastic thing to consider.
Yeah, definitely. And also, we should never forget the product we're talking about. As far as health benefit, you're talking on superfood. It's so healthy. Look at different nutritional values and what you can, different nutritions affect or benefit our health. And you could see every one of them in seafood.
That's right. I think people like Elspeth MacDonald at the Scottish Fishermen's Federation and Marcus Coleman at Seafish are really strong at representing the industry. But we are producing this fantastic food for people to eat. And sometimes I think that folk can forget that fish are really interesting species, and people can forget that this species becomes really an important food for the world.
Yeah, as I said, when you look, just as one example, you look at all the essential minerals that we need to be healthy, and just say for one of them, zinc. Well, oysters put zinc off the Richter scale.
There's some really interesting projects being run about mussels in schools and shellfish in schools, and of course people like the Shellfish Association of Great Britain. All of that work to tell the great stories is really important, isn't it?
And not to forget, you've mentioned the word a few times today, and everybody loves a story.
No, it's absolutely true. And sometimes you have to explain to people why you're trying to tell that story. So, for example, when there was an awful lot of talk about a year or so ago about emissions from vessels and whether seafood as the carbon conscious industry. And there was an awful lot of people talking about net zero and decarbonisation. And one of the things that we like to do at Fizz is just to have a big kind of closer look at some of these stories that come out in the media. And we wondered, well, what does decarbonisation mean for us as seafood producers? What does net zero mean? What does a just transition mean? So we got people together to have a discussion about what that might mean for us. And we asked Macduff Ship Design to help us understand what a net zero vessel might look like. And again, people were again, why on earth would you want to look at this? It's impossible or it's difficult. And we didn't want to do it because we thought it would be easy. We wanted to do it so that we had an idea of what it actually meant. All these buzzwords of net zero or no emissions, what would it mean? And we asked, as I say, Macduff Ship Design to look at the most plausible pathways forward for the UK fleet. So often the headlines were, oh, let's sort of move to electric vessels. You're like, really? Could we do that? What would that mean? Or you heard people say, oh, they're managing to use such and such fuel in Norway. They're looking at LNG or methanol in Norway. So we wanted to have a closer look at what that meant to us, and it showed from these first ever concept designs that Macduff Ship Design helped us prepare, was that these vessels would be possible in the future. Some of the fuels could be possible even now. However, all alternative fuels have a lower energy density and more complicated storage and handling requirements, so that if we were to take these buzzwords or the headlines about net zero vessels, you would need to have significant thought going into what your infrastructure looked like, the supply chains in terms of being able to build these vessels, the safety requirements around these vessels, the training needs for the people who work onshore and offshore. So behind a buzzword like net zero or no emissions from fishing vessels, there's actually an awful lot of thought needs to go into those things. And for us to help for either individual skippers or businesses or vessel builders and vessel designers, they need support to understand how we get from where we are now to where either the supermarkets or government want us to be in 2045, for example. So a lot of it is taking those seemingly quite easy questions that get mentioned in the media, a just transition, and really picking it apart to say, well, what will that mean for the fishing industry and the seafood industry, and how do we get from A to B in a way that helps businesses stay safe and competitive?
Yeah, very true. Well said as well.
And it was saying it in a way, it was really important for us not just to say, oh, it will be different, because again, we've talked a lot today about we don't often get the benefit of the doubt, do we? Or some people would say, well, they would say that. So by working with vessel builders, vessel designers, working with universities such as Exeter University's Centre for Future Clean Mobility, if they're all saying, yes, there's a lot of thought needs to go into how we move in a truly just transition that doesn't leave people behind, that doesn't leave businesses with stranded assets, that makes sure that we do this in the most safe way possible, it takes a lot of thought. Whereas I find that if an individual fishing business said it's too hard, people would go, well, they would say that, wouldn't they? So, together we can say we are thinking about these things, but we do need financial support and a roadmap to help us make sure that we all stay in business and we all stay safe.
Tell me, you leveraged, is it £3 million into innovation?
Yeah. Now, I must be very clear. I'd love to say it was all me. I only came into FIS about 5 years ago, and obviously Fisheries Innovation Scotland has been around since about 2014, and we became a UK organisation last year. So lots of people have been involved in this. So it's either, as I say, we're funded and governed by our board. So our board are incredibly generous with their membership fees, but also we either match fund, we apply for grant funding, for example, with the Seafood Innovation Fund that's helped us with Smart Trawl, with Marine Fund Scotland that's helped us with our net zero vessel designs, and working with everybody from the Clyde Fishermen's Trust, who we ran our workshops looking at a just transition, looking at net zero vessels, and we got some money from people like the Lloyd's Register Foundation. So we're very keen to work with people and match fund and to raise funds that goes directly into all the projects. Doesn't come to FIS, doesn't come to go to individuals, but helps us create these projects that we can take forward together.
It's commendable.
It's hard work. I have to say, there's fewer pots of money and less money. And I feel very strongly that when there is money available for sustainability at sea, then I feel it should come to coalitions that really know what they're talking about, that can implement things directly and that can trial things at sea to make a difference, rather than, I want things to be practical rather than reports that may or may not actually see the light of day. So we want to make sure that the money that is out there is spent properly and actually helps us improve things.
How would you see about the support prosperous and sustainable UK seafood? It's got an exciting future.
I hope so.
And I think as I said already, I'm repeating myself, it's in good hands. The industry's in good hands. But there's a lot of really good people in it. And it's an industry with lots of amazing characters.
Oh, absolutely. There are folk that, I say to them, had it not been their generosity when I was really new in this sector and didn't mind me asking the daft questions. There were some people who just straight away went, okay, then right, let's tell you what the reality is of this. And we're really, open. And I think that if anybody comes into the seafood industry and is genuinely interested and asks questions, everybody is so generous with their time. And in saying that, I hope people continue to be so, because we're always looking for ideas for what those innovation needs are to help the UK seafood industry. So, if there are people out there, if your listeners, if they have ideas about how we could improve the way that we catch seafood, process seafood, how we manage fisheries, how we structure markets and supply chains, any of those ideas that could help lead to whether it's a greater efficiency or reducing environmental impact, please do get in touch. We want to hear ideas that need testing or problems to unravel. Or I don't think we're good enough about telling the good news stories. And again, I'm using those words, but the best practice. How do we help roll out best practice? How do we make sure that people know about the great moves forward within the industry? There's always so many negative stories, and yet every day you hear about good ideas and good people doing good things, and we should do more to trumpet that.
Yeah. To finish up, I would just like to thank you so much for today, Kara. And a parting thought. I think, yes, there's maybe countries further advanced, but there's always somebody better or further ahead out there. But we're not sitting back in the doldrums. We're in a good place.
I absolutely agree. And we're here we talk with similar organisations. So there's the innovation centres in Canada, the universities in Newfoundland. We talk a lot with colleagues in the States. There's great projects happening in West Africa. There's lots of things happening there, and we learn from and can help wherever we can.
Yeah, and that's really the ethos of your whole organisation. All sectors talking to each other. I think that's so fantastic, and it's really pleasing to hear.
Oh, thank you. You've been so supportive, and thanks for giving us this opportunity to tell people a little about what we do.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you liked it, hit subscribe, share it with a friend, or leave a 5-star review. And if you want to speak with me, visit seafoodmatterspodcast.com.